Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. Well, the Julian Assange extradition trial is ongoing in London right now. Just about everyone I know associated with this travesty of justice is there. I'm very happy that we have Suzie Dawson. She is a friend of Julian Assange, an activist, a journalist, and a very public and courageous public defender of Julian Assange during all of these travesties of justice, as I said here. Suzie, let's kind of break this down into two parts here. What exactly is going on? What is this trial about? Because I've been following the through a transcript through consortiumnews.com, and this is really a clash of British law and American law, and they were really arguing at cross purposes here. And there's this lack of recognition on the part of the prosecution that Julian Assange is a journalist and a publisher. They keep trying to veer away from that here. So for our viewers, please explain what this trial is about, because it's not getting a whole lot of public coverage, needless to say. Go ahead, Suzie.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. I think the discussion over whether or not Julian is a journalist is completely ludicrous in the face of the dozens of international and domestic within Australia media awards that Julian has accrued across the course of his career. He is credentialed by multiple press associations. He is recognised around the world as the foremost publisher and journalist of our time. And so it's quite farcical that those who oppose him attempt to attack him on what is an obviously very long and very successful career of publishing, which I might add that utterly dwarfs those of his critics, who certainly have not accrued nearly so many awards as he has, nor do they have such an illustrious publishing career. What's really happening from my perspective in London is that the corrupt persons and organizations whose nefarious activities have been exposed by WikiLeaks are putting him on trial for having exposed them. We know that the judge who is involved in the current proceedings, Judge Baritza, her husband is a defense industry contractor, is associated directly with the UK government and has worked for them in the past, which makes it really ludicrous that she and he would be the ones to be deciding Julian's fate. Justice is supposed to be open justice, as many have noted in recent days, yet this trial has been anything but. It has been closed. They have been restricting access to the courtroom, even to Kristen Hrafnsson, the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, the editor-in-chief of the very publication that published the documents for which Julian is being prosecuted, has been unable to access the courtroom. We have seen a blanket silence really across mainstream media. I've logged on to publications across Australasia and the world looking for coverage about this trial, and it simply doesn't exist, despite the fact that it really is the trial of the century. So it seems that simultaneously they are wanting to both punish Julian and make an example of him within his profession, and yet they are also trying to sweep the whole matter under the rug in terms of the public view.
Well, it was very interesting. There were many publications that rode on Julian Assange's coattails to fame with the documents that he was able to release to the public. They were all The Guardian, the New York Times. Everybody was happy that there's this whistleblower, and then it all changed. And then all of a sudden they focused all of their air on him, and they had nothing to do with it. But of course they had plenty to do with it. And it was only when their handlers in the deep state began to realize the implications of this, and then they basically essentially turned state's evidence by being silent. What is really interesting, and what our viewers really have to understand, is really what's in play here. We can talk about the issue of a whistleblower. the legality of releasing information. But what Julian Assange has done is he's revealed war crimes and criminality from the highest places in governments around the world. But his opponents will say, you shouldn't have done that. You illegally released. They never want to talk about the substance of what he released through individuals that gave him access to it. They don't want to talk about that. The things that I have read never mention that. Okay, he released names of informants. Well, that is a legal issue. Okay, that's not really the what's in play here. What they're looking at lawfare to go after him to silence the substance of what he revealed to the public.
I absolutely concur. And wherever you see a narrative used against Julian and WikiLeaks, the opposite is in fact the truth. So when we hear WikiLeaks risks lives or WikiLeaks hurt people, actually WikiLeaks contributed to what became the withdrawal of US troops from Iraq. That saved uncountable lives. We cannot measure how many lives were saved by that withdrawal. We cannot measure how many lives have been saved around the world by WikiLeaks publications. We know that their publications have been cited in tens of thousands of successful court cases around the world. For example, WikiLeaks have provided evidence and truth to myriad complainants the world over who have been able to achieve judicial recourse as a result of those publications. The good that WikiLeaks has done is impossible to measure, and they try to distract from that by this baseless allegation of harm having been caused. And yet when push comes to shove, as we know from the Chelsea Manning hearings, the US government has actually had to back down from that and admit on the record that they could not cite a single case where WikiLeaks publications had endangered anyone. Yet we can certainly cite cases where WikiLeaks has saved lives. For example, the Azerbaijani journalist Amin Husseinov, who Julian helped to arrange the asylum to escape from Azerbaijan to Switzerland and actually helped to arrange his asylum. That's just one example of Julian intervening to save somebody who was at risk. A more famous example, of course, is Edward Snowden, who we know again was left hung out to dry in Hong Kong. And it was Julian Assange and WikiLeaks who provided the initiative and the resource to get Snowden out and to get him to safety. And so oftentimes people talk to me about what is the cost of us losing Julian? And there are many, many costs if we are to lose Julian. But for me personally, the lives of future journalists and whistleblowers who Julian would have intervened for, who Julian would have helped to protect and to save, these are deeply significant to me personally, and that is the loss that I feel the greatest. Julian is somebody who helps others, who wraps his arms around them and protects them, and that is the deepest loss that I feel at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, making the claim that Julian Assange personally put people's risks at lives, he was reporting through whistleblowers the harm that these governments were doing to peoples all over the world. Okay, I mean, just like you said, it's turning everything upside down. What we know about what happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq, we would not know that history. We would not know that lineage without WikiLeaks. I am absolutely convinced of that, because we do know now is that there was an entire industry of lying to the public and to presidents what was going on in those wars. I mean, that has been exposed. I mean, and Julian Assange was the spearhead of that. And for me, that not only is this one person's liberty being denied, which is you're from Australia, I am from the United States. That is the bedrock of our political culture, is the rights of individuals. And they have to be respected, irrespective of how you personally feel about it. And this is being completely eroded away. We hear about, how people value whistleblowers. Well, whistleblowers, that whole definition has been changed over the last year or so, in my opinion. It's the whistleblowers are those that protect power. I mean, how did that happen? When you look at what happened with Ukraine-gate in the United States, they've actually completely turned around the meaning of a whistleblower. And I'm willing to say, like John Kiriakou and Julian Assange and many others, they put flesh on bones of what a real whistleblower should be. And they should be people that we prize and protect and promote. And what we have is the opposite.
Unfortunately, that's the case. I'm from New Zealand. Julian is from Australia. Obviously, New Zealand is very close to Australia, and so we do have some
I'm sure I'm
cultural
not the first one
crossover
that made
between
that
us.
mistake.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, the Anzacs have always been like this together, Australia and New Zealand. Um, I, in the sense of whistleblowers and journalism, there's often in this debate about is Julian a whistleblower? Is Julian a journalist? Is Julian a publisher? Is Julian, but he would say that he's a publisher.
Yeah,
Others would say that he's a journalist. But if you look at my Twitter bio, you'll see there a statement that I made long ago, which I firmly believe, and that's that real journalists whistleblow every time they write. If a journalist is doing what a journalist should do, they are whistleblowing to the public on serious matters of public concern. And so I think it's fair in that sense of true journalism being about enabling whistleblower to refer to Julian as being both of those. Just one other point that I would make too is that, and I mentioned this on Twitter today, that in my opinion, if journalism was about public service, then every single journalist would be anti-war. 100% of journalists would be anti-war if they were about public service. And both Julian and WikiLeaks absolutely are about anti-war. And it was Julian who said that if war can be started with lies, the peace can be started with truth. And that is why those who want war lie about Julian, and why those of us who want peace tell the truth about him.
Well, and this has become so apparent here, and what really bothers me is that the standards of journalism have been completely thrown out the window, because journalists now have they're advocates now. They're no longer journalists. Okay, the truth is something that neither here nor there for them. They don't even understand, I think, the idea of the truth. Okay, because the idea of truth gets in their way of where they want to go. Their personal standing in society, maybe their wealth, their ego, their careers. I mean, that's all it has gotten down to. There's very little journalism out there. I've already mentioned, I think I've mentioned consortiumnews.com. That is a place where there's real journalism going on. But, from my experience, Google's not very friendly to consortium news, okay? You really have to go straight there to see it, to find it, okay? But thank goodness they're still there. So why don't you finish up for us? What are you expecting for later this week? And we'll speak again when there's the next step. Go ahead.
Well, a very smart person said to me that the job of Julian's legal team this week is to create opportunities for appeal. Nobody really is expecting this to be anything other than the farce and the show trial that it has so far proven to be. Absolutely, we're expecting that it will go to the next stage after this, which would be appeal. We know from the case of Laurie Love in the UK, who again was a hacktivist who the US wanted to extradite on spurious computer intrusion charges, and ultimately failed to do so after Julian, WikiLeaks, and the Courage Foundation, which was co-founded by Julian, intervened in Laurie's case and helped to advocate for him. We are very much hoping that, like Laurie's case, there will be a successful outcome at the appeals stage. We are hoping that once it gets to a higher court, that there will be a greater amount of transparency and therefore more pressure to provide a fair hearing than there has been at this lower round. But the reality is that Julian himself is rotting in a maximum security prison in the meantime. And we know that he is sick. We know that he has been psychologically tortured, as has been evidenced by the UN Special Rapporteur for Torture, Nils Melzer, and a number of doctors who have examined Julian have also ratified that finding. And so we are torn between hope for the future and understanding that the reality is utterly miserable and indeed dangerous for Julian, and also torturous for his family and those around him.
The interesting thing is that WikiLeaks' mission has always been about transparency, but when Julian Assange and essentially WikiLeaks is put on trial, it gets anything but transparency. Suzie Dawson, thank you for joining the Gaggle here, and as this story continues, we'll speak again. Thank you.